So you're looking for, obviously, two things: the short-term, immediate return, as well as the long-term growth of the company for the long-term returns.
Yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing the second stage financing, you're always trying to keep two things in mind. One is that the company may seek at a later date an expansion by way of either a private placement investment or number two, and this is what I think everybody now dreams for, and that is to try to expand the company through an IPO.
Mm-hmm.
And the second stage funding and how that's structured for the company can become critical at the point that the company goes for an IPO. You can make mistakes at the second stage level, which are extremely difficult to undo at the IPO stage.
Well, give us some examples of what kind of critical steps that an inventor, there again, for somebody maybe who doesn't have a business background who is watching the broadcast, give them an idea of what type of critical steps they should be looking for. What's critical in this second stage financing?
What's critical is to have a clear understanding as to what role the investor will take. Some investors are interested in having merely a passive investment, and they really do not want to take an active role in the management or day-to-day operations of the company. But many investors are exactly the opposite of that, and they are going to want to come in and have perhaps a controlling management position and also maybe a very large equity position as well.
Mm-hmm.
This may or may not be good for the inventor. It could be good. It's not always bad to have the investor come in and have that type of control and ownership. But in many cases, if you're trying to structure for a later further expansion, you're going to want to retain enough equity in that company to be able to offer equity to the investors at the third stage.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the pitfalls, or maybe you've already covered the pitfalls of the second-tier financing, the fact that you may not get linked with an investor that is necessarily has the same motivation as you do in the early stages?
That's true. One thing that an investor should look at is keeping the right of first refusal or the right of refusal for a potential investor. It may seem hard to believe that an inventor might turn down an investor, but if the deal is not right, in the long run, the inventor would be better off having not accepted the investment.
Yeah, that would be true. Yeah. What do you find is some of the critical features when putting together an investor and inventor? You mentioned in our last show we talked about personalities. Does that play?
I think that's the primary. That's the main factor.
Mm-hmm.
If the inventor and the investor like each other, well, then more than likely they're going to get along pretty well, and they can end up having a pretty successful operation.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a lot of friction, you can usually tell that. You know how people are. You can usually tell that right at the beginning, and better off cutting bait at that point. There are plenty of investors, and there are plenty of inventors.
Do you, in your role as bringing these investors and inventors together, do you sometimes make recommendations against parties going together?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. Sometimes you might not be overt about it, but you can just tell that there would be some type of conflict, and you try to avoid it.
Mm-hmm. Do you build in any type of plan in case there's a parting of ways when you do an investment like this?
Oh, yes. I think that's critical, and that is you have to have an exit strategy.
Mm-hmm.
The inventor needs an exit strategy for ultimately selling his invention to, or her invention to, whatever company is finalized. And then the investor, of course, wants to see a return at some point. So yes, it's important to have a good understanding of how the relationship will terminate.
Okay. Now, we brought the people together. We've talked about the financing. Let's talk about what happens after the second-tier financing occurs and the business starting to grow. And what are some of the interplay between the investor and the inventor, and what happens along those lines?
At that stage, usually right after the financing, the investors will have a rather significant role in the company. That's certainly not always true in the case of a passive investor. It's not true, but in many other situations, the investors will have a significant presence in the office, in the warehouse, whatever it happens to be, and the investors will then will develop an intimate working knowledge of the company and how it works, and what the invention is and how it's useful, because then At that point, the investors have the potential of being marketers for the company as well. And now that's actually very good because they have the same incentive as the inventor at that time.
Do you find that the investors, you mentioned that it's a fairly tight group of people that you deal with, the investment community there. Do you find that the ability of a product to grow is sometimes dependent upon that investor knowing where the investment community is and getting to them and being able to sell their products through that investment community?
Yes, indeed. And again, it's personality and emotion and things that people like and things that people don't like. If you know this particular investor's hobby is pick a hobby, why, and then the inventor has something to do with that hobby, why, that's the first person you're going to go see.
Yeah.